Hey everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to this week's reading vlog. So it is officially November, and that means it's time to kick off Storython 3.0 and the Once Upon a Readathon. I'm very excited to be taking part in both of these. This is actually going to be a 4-day vlog, because this weekend I'm doing a separate vlog for the Cat Lady Readathon, where I will be reading nothing but cat books. So you can look forward to that. I really enjoyed that last time, and I will try to get tons of cute footage of my kitties and see if I can get as many of them as I can on camera. Some of them are harder to get than others. One of them never leaves my parents' bedroom, and so I don't get footage of her as easily. One of them has taken to exclusively sleeping under my couch and only comes out when they want to eat, drink, or visit the litter box, so she is also going to be hard to get footage of, but we'll see what I can do. So I have already started reading, but not for any of my readathons. I read Storm of Dogs. This is the 6th and final book in the first arc of 6 in the Survivor series, and I'm giving this 4.5 stars. I love this book. I'm shocked that by the end, I was really attached to these characters, and I really cared what was going to happen and how things were going to wrap up. In this series, we're following Lucky, who starts off the series as a lone dog and is in a trap house, which I think is kind of like a dog catcher's or a vet's, when a big growl hits, which is a giant earthquake, and all the humans disappear, and all of the dogs, whether they're lone dogs, leash dogs, or wild dogs, have to figure out how to survive now that the humans have gone and the world has kind of changed due to this big growl. And my did Lucky go on quite the journey during this arc. I was not expecting to love the last 2 books in the series as much as I did, because book 5 got 4.25 stars but was this close to being 4.5. And I went into this thinking this just is not going to be my favorite series, and now I cannot wait to pick up the second arc of 6 and see what comes next for these characters. So very surprising. And I read books 5 and 6 in one sitting. Not like back to back, but like it took me one sitting to read book 5, and then on a different night it took me one sitting to read book 6. So really enjoyed the conclusion of this arc and cannot wait to pick up the second one, which is good because I'm planning to get to books 1, 2, and 3 of that arc this month. We'll see how I do. And then the other update I have is that I've read part of The Lost History of Stars. So I am on page 94, so I'm making decent progress in this. And this is centered around the Boer War, and we're in South Africa, and we're following a young girl named Letty who ends up in a concentration camp after British soldiers show up and basically destroy her family's home and takes her and her mom and her siblings to this concentration camp. It was pretty brutal watching what they did. I will say I'm going to put a trigger warning in here for a bit of, I don't know if it's animal cruelty so much, but she has livestock and they slaughter the livestock before they take Letty and her family to this camp. And there is some description of that, and I know that bothers me, so I wanted to let everybody know. It's not a huge spoiler or anything because it happens very early on in the book and is minor, but it is there. So if that's something that makes you squeamish, be aware that it does happen, because it does make me squeamish. I know it is a thing that happens. I know there are people who raise animals to kill them for food. I know this kind of thing has happened in the past. It's just not something I particularly like reading on page. And I do better if I know it's coming. So, warning, if you want to read this book, there is a bit of that in the beginning. Just beware. I had no idea any of this has happened. This is all new information for me. There's so much history that I just am not privy to because it did not come up in world history in school. And since it wasn't U.S. history, they certainly weren't teaching it. So I'm very intrigued to learn more about the situation and what is going to happen to Letty and her family and how things are going to progress. I'm definitely interested in this book. It's definitely hooked me, and I'm enjoying it so far. So the other books I plan to get to, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next few days, my stack is up there, is the main one is Reawakened, which is the first book in the Once Upon a Tale series. And I need to get to this because for my Cat Lady readathon, I want to read Leopard Star's Honor. And to do this for the Once Upon a Readathon, I need to read this to get to the step where I can read this. So this is my other main priority. And yeah, I think that's the main book. I have some historical fictions I could read if I finish this one. I have other books on my TBR, like I need to read some of the second arc of Six and Survivors. I have Mari and the Great Game, which is on my Phase 10 TBR, but not on one of my readathon TBRs. So I have a lot of options. I would also like to finish The Harbinger and War of Cards. So we'll see what kind of reading I can get done in the first 4 days of November. But I think this is the main focus because I want to read Leopard Star's Honor. So I can't do that if I don't read this. So this will be my main focus. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. We're going to kind of play it by ear. I would also like to get some editing done because, well, I have October's vlogs to put out and it's now November. So we'll see how it goes and I will check back in with you soon, hopefully with an update on these two. Now Saturday, which means it's time to wrap this vlog up and switch gears because I have the Cat Lady readathon this weekend, so I will be focusing a little bit more on cat books and less on whatever it is I feel like reading. So since I last spoke to you, I finished 4 books. First, I finished The Lost History of Stars by David Bowling. I'm giving this book 4 stars. This follows Letty and her family during the Boer War, and they are taken to a concentration camp. And we get to see what their lives are like there. We also flash back to Letty's life in, I want to say, like the year or so leading up to her family being taken to this concentration camp. And I found this book to be absolutely fascinating. I wasn't sure what to expect as I know nothing about the Boer War. Or at least going into this, I knew nothing about the Boer War. I feel like I know a lot more about it now than I did going into this. Letty has a younger brother and a younger sister and her mom with her. And I think Letty is just old enough to kind of understand what's going on. So she makes a really good protagonist as she explains to us the magnitude of being in this concentration camp, but kind of still understanding and seeing it through a child's eyes, which gives you a completely different viewpoint of what's going on. I got really attached to Letty and her family. And again, I had no idea any of this had ever happened. So as heart-wrenching as it was to know that this was the thing that was happening, it was also quite fascinating to read about and learn about and kind of see Letty's situation and getting to see all of the different people she interacts with in this concentration camp and how her life kind of progressed. Really glad I picked this up. Was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. And this is the first book for my Historathon 3.0 TBR, which means I can check off read a book with Lost in the title. Then for something completely different, I read Who Was Babe Ruth. This is a Who HQ book, and it is a middle grade biography about baseball player Babe Ruth. I'm giving this 4 stars. I maintain that middle grade me would have loved these. I definitely will be passing them on to the youngins in my life when they get a little bit older. It was quite interesting to learn about Babe from a completely different viewpoint. I knew stuff because I pay attention to baseball. So like, I'm not completely ignorant as to who Babe Ruth was, but it was quite interesting to hear about his beginnings and where he came from and learn more about his family. It was interesting to hear about like how much money he made and realizing that, like, he's one of the most famous players to ever play the game and how little money he made starting out. And even when he was at the height of his career, he was making tons of money for the time that he was in. But it is literal chump change compared to what baseball players make today, which is absolutely fascinating. I am really, really enjoying this series and look forward to reading more of the Who HQ books in the future, because they're nice little quick snippets into famous figures' lives, and I've really enjoyed the 2 that I've read. Then I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I'm giving this 4.5 stars. So this is a cozy fantasy, which gives me very hard House on the Cerulean Sea vibes. And in this, we're following a witch named Mika, who feels very, very lonely and has grown up being told she has to hide her magic and she must stay away from other witches, and believing that nobody will ever care about her for her, despite the fact that she's a witch. And she ends up getting contacted by the residents of Nowhere House because they need her help. They are raising 3 young witches who are struggling to keep their power under control, and they want Mika to help teach the girls how to navigate their powers, how to control it, how to use it, how to master it, so that they can live lives where they don't have to hide away, as Nowhere House is kind of out of the way and they don't really interact with people who don't live in the house and know that they're witches. Mika ends up agreeing to teach these witches, even though she's not sure she's capable, and soon grows attached to the 3 young witches and their 4 very different caretakers. But something ends up threatening that, and she has to kind of figure out how she's going to deal with that. This has amazing found family vibes. I love Mika, and I love every single person that she interacts with in the Nowhere House, because they're all such different characters. But by the end of the novel, I loved all of them, and I grew really, really attached to this group of individuals, which is exactly how I felt when I was reading The House in the Cerulean Sea. The only reason this doesn't get 5 stars is because it took me a little bit longer to get into than I would have liked. And it took me a little bit longer to get attached to the characters, but once I did, I was completely enamored. I love, 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 love this book. And if you like House in the Cerulean Sea, I would suggest you check this out. If you like kind of cozy fantasies and witchy vibes and found family, again, check this out. This was just such a fun, heartwarming read, and I'm so, so glad that I read it and that it came in at the library, because I had heard so many people raving about it, and I'm so glad that I got my hands on it and was able to read it. And then the last book I read is Reawakened. So this is essentially the first season of Once Upon a Time, the TV show, in book form. I'm giving this 3.75 stars. There were things I really, really loved about it, because it does stay very, very true for the most part to the TV show, and it follows the timeline exactly. However, there were certain things that were sort of changed, like certain iconic lines from the characters that, like, I've watched that scene multiple times. So when I got to that scene and it didn't play out exactly like it did on the TV show, I was disappointed. So I might have liked it more had I read this before watching the TV show, but I've watched the TV show. So if you've watched the TV show and you want to read the first season in book form, this is for you. If you haven't watched the TV show and you are not a big TV fan but like the idea of the show, then this book might be for you. If you don't know, Once Upon a Time is a series that takes fairy tale characters and transplants them to our world. And our protagonist is Emma Swan, who was orphaned, and one day a young boy shows up at her house and tells her, "I'm your son. I need you to come back to Storybrooke with me where I live and break a curse." I absolutely love the series, and this was an enjoyable read. It got knocked down a little bit because, well, I wanted it to be exactly like the TV show, and it wasn't always 100% like it. But it definitely captures the vibes of the TV show. This also means that I have finished the first part of my quest for Once Upon a Readathon, because I needed to read a book featuring royalty, which this has, Prince Charming and the Evil Queen, and Snow White is a princess, so there's lots of royalty in that regard. It needed to be a retelling. This is obviously one, a retelling of the show, but two, also a retelling of all of these classic stories. And three, for hard mode, it needed to have two of the words once upon a time in either the title name or the series name, and the series name is a Once Upon a Time tale. Like, that's the name of the series. So, I get all of the points, complete this step, and I get to move on to the next step in my quest. So that is all of the reading I've done in the first 4 days of November. I think it's pretty decent. I think I finished 5 books in 4 days, which, I mean, this one was relatively short, so I don't know that it really counts. But it is still 5 books in 4 days, and I needed to read, well, this one wasn't technically on my TBR, but I got it from the library. It's a 14-day book, so I was going to read it before I wrapped up Finds. Plus, I was really excited to read it because I'd heard nothing but good things. The rest of them were all in some way on my TBR, whether Phase 10, Historathon 3.0, Once Upon a Readathon, or just my own personal books that I wanted to get to in the month of November TBR. So, very good progress there. Now it's time to switch gears. I will be reading nothing but kitty books this weekend, and I'm quite looking forward to it. So, yeah, that's it for this week's vlog. Well, this weekday vlog, because it went from Tuesday to Friday. So that's it for this weekday vlog. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me emojis that make you think of Africa, since I read a book that was set in South Africa. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!